Welcome to our first ever virtual WaterTalk program. I'm Seth Wallach, Community Outreach Coordinator for the Water Authority. With me, I've got Tom Schneider, our Laboratory Manager, Joe Pokorny, our Deputy CEO for Operations, and Ty Fuller, our Lead Hydrogeologist and our Director of Strategic Initiatives, along with Tim Motes, our Director of Communications. We're going to jump right into the presentation right now. But we will be taking all of your questions at the end. So if during the presentation, if you do have a question, just go ahead and click on that Q&A link in the bottom left of the Zoom call, type in your question, and then we'll be answering everyone's questions at the end. All right. So like I said, welcome to WaterTalk. First things first, why do we do this program? There's a lot of information out there about drinking water. It's something that's in the news pretty often. So we just want to make sure that everyone has the same accurate information about their drinking water. A few years ago, we kicked off this program. We hold it county-wide. We've been in communities from Melville all the way out to Montauk. We've done it on the North Fork. And you're going to hear from our experts today about topics vital to the protection and the preservation of our drinking water supply. You're going to hear about the steps our laboratory takes to test the water and all that they do to make sure that the water is safe to drink. And we're going to talk to you about some of the local infrastructure projects that affect you and your water in Lindenhurst. We're also going to tell you about WaterTraq, which is a great program that lets you monitor your water quality from home, which is terrific. And going to talk to you about water conservation and the importance of that, using water judiciously. And like I said, most importantly, we're here to answer your questions at home. Suffolk County Water Authority, we're an independent public benefit corporation. We operate under the Public Authorities Law of the state of New York. We serve about 1.2 million people in Suffolk County. That's about 85% of Suffolk County residents. And we began our operations in 1951. We operate without taxing power on a not-for-profit basis. And we are one of the largest groundwater suppliers in the country. So a little bit about our rates. We've got some of the lowest water rates in the country among large water suppliers. And our two AAA bond ratings do put us in the top 1 percentile for all of the nation's 20,000 water suppliers in terms of fiscal responsibility, which is very important to us and very important for our customers because it helps keep our rates so low. So we are not. Suffolk County Water Authority is not a branch of Suffolk County government, despite our name. A lot of people make that mistake. And we do not create or enforce the drinking water standards. This is done by the United States Environmental Protection Agency and the New York State Department of Health. A little bit of our statistics. We've got 586 active wells at 237 well fields. We have 64 storage tanks, which hold 68 million gallons of water at any given time. And our average daily pumpage is about 210 million gallons. Our average peak pumpage in the summer is up to 470 million gallons. And so at this time, I'm going to introduce Joe Pokorny, who's going to talk to you a little bit about your infrastructure in Lindenhurst and what you need to know. So take it away, Joe.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Seth. Thanks for that introduction. Thanks, everybody, for coming today to hear our first virtual water talk. We've been doing these in person, but unfortunately, we've now doing them virtually. But there, this has some benefits to it, and that we can probably get these out to more people and more frequently. So we'll probably be doing more of them as time goes on. So as Seth said, my name is Joe Pokorny. I'm the Deputy CEO for Operations at the Water Authority. And I'm basically responsible for the production and the distribution of water throughout the county and throughout all our facilities. So let me show you a map of our facilities. So if you take a look, there's a common misconception that all the water from Long Island comes from some mysterious river in Connecticut or from New York City, but it really is not true. Hopefully you know that the water actually comes from the ground. And when we say from the ground, we actually mean through wells that are drilled down into the ground. And as you can see from this map, we have wells that go all the way from the Nassau County line in Amityville and up in Cold Spring Harbor, all the way out to the North Fork, out to East Marion, and all the way out on the South Fork, out to Montauk Point. So this is quite a service area. This is almost 600 wells, as Seth had pointed out in our statistics. There's quite an area to cover. So in order to do that, we have several different locations where we have our operations and maintenance people. And those locations on the west end, the one closest to Copeg and the Lindenhurst area, is our Bayshore facility. And then where I am and where a lot of our headquarters are and many of our people are staged out of is in the Oakdale area. We also have our engineering department in Great River on the north side of Sunrise Highway. Our laboratory is up in Hop Hog, and we have an office up in the Huntington area that serves that whole area up in Huntington. And we have an area kind of in the central part of the island in Coram. That's where our call center is, our customer service call center. Then we actually, when we get out east, we have a location in West Hampton on County Road 31, just off of Sunrise Highway. And we have an area just west of the East Hampton Village, and that's called our Bridgehampton or East Hampton Operations Center. So we have a number of locations so that we can respond quickly, because the emergency business is very often what we're in. When there's a water main break or some type of emergency, we have to be able to respond quickly. And having offices spread out like this and people ready to go at those offices makes that much easier to do. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about the infrastructure in our system. Again, all of those wells that you see there, every one of those wells can be kind of boiled down into this cartoon here that shows you a typical location where we have wells. And if you take a look, you can see these two wells that are shown. Hopefully you can see my mouse. I think you can. These two wells are drilled at different depths. So that is primarily because on Long Island we have different aquifers that can be a source of water for us. And so our hydrogeologists are constantly drilling down and testing the water quality and looking at the geology down below us to select water and depths of wells that is really the best for our system, because the water quality varies tremendously. And if I go back here, if I go from the west end of the system all the way out to the east end to Montauk, water quality varies tremendously, and from north to south. And all of that has to do with hydrogeology and geology, what's below us, and location. For instance, if you get out here to Montauk, you can see there's really not a lot of land sitting out there in the middle of the ocean. And in that location out there, we have to be very conscious of our wells and saltwater intrusion. When we come back to the main body of the island, we don't really have that problem. But then we have issues where the area on the north, the aquifer is very porous, and things that go on the surface get down into the aquifer very easily. And on the South Shore, we have a very different problem, and that has to do with the water quality associated with metals and iron. So I think Tom from our lab is going to talk about that in a little while. I'm going to show you some stuff about our infrastructure. So each area has unique water related issues. And, again, when you look at this, the way it's distributed, and what this really means to you as a water consumer is the water that you're consuming in your area is really produced in your area. We don't produce water in Montauk and send it to Amityville. In fact, we don't even produce water in Central Islip and send it to Amityville. Our pipes are just not that big. The largest pipes in our system are probably about 12 inches in diameter, and that restricts how far we can move water. So what you're consuming in your home is typically locally produced within just a couple of miles of your home. So if you take a look at this cartoon that shows you these wells, this also shows you how the water that gets into your well, or the well that serves your home, where it comes from on the surface of the ground. And we have hydrogeologists and engineers on staff that have studied this, and they have models that actually show how the water and where the water lands on the ground recharges our wells. And if you see this, you can get an idea. You can see these wells, and you can see the rain over here. And if I push a button here, you can see here the water is percolating down into the ground far away from where the well is, and it's making its way underground. If the water, when the water percolates through the ground from rainwater, it not only moves vertically, but it moves horizontally. So what that means is that the water that comes into the screen of the well, which is way down at the bottom of the well, that water very often could land on the earth and come in as percolation and as precipitation, which is what recharges our well, it could be 1,000 feet away, it could be several thousand feet away, it could be miles away. And that's very important for our engineers and hydrogeologists to understand that, because when you see that, and you can see this one here, this shows an even shallower well, the water that recharges that well actually lands on the surface of the earth in a much closer proximity to the well. So it's very important for our engineers to understand that, because what we can do is we can look at land use in these areas to understand whether there are potential threats to our wells, because if there's something going on here to pollute the groundwater, we're going to see that at some point, and there is a time delay, and that time is very important. But that's very important for us to understand that when trying to find out where contaminants are coming from. So this is a tool, it's called Source Water Assessment. We've been using it for over 10 years now, and it's all computer-based, but it's a very, very important tool from us to tell where the water is coming from. If you take a look in your area, the area of Lindenhurst and Copiague, there are really 4 well fields that serve this area. And on the west side up to the north, there's a well field called Great Neck Road. That's on Great Neck Road. There are 4 wells there. There's another site not too far from there called Albany Avenue. And you may have seen that. There's an elevated storage tank there, a very large elevated storage tank at that site. And as we come down here south of Sunrise Highway and down off of Hoffman Avenue, there's a site called our Lambert Avenue site that's got another water storage tank that's elevated. It's got like a checkerboard or yellow color on the top of it. And that site, we have 3 wells at that location. And at Albany Avenue, we have another well field at that location, and that also has an elevated tank. So there are elevated tanks at 3 locations in this fairly densely populated area of Lindenhurst and Copiague. Now, as I said before, one of the challenges in this area is the water quality. We find that we have a lot of iron in the native groundwater. So at all of these locations, we have what are called iron removal filters. And if you take a look, and you can see, we have in our total fleet at the Water Authority, we have about 30 iron removal systems installed at various well fields. And you can see many of them are down here in the southwest corner because of the, like I said, the preponderance of iron in that area. This is what an iron filter looks like. It's basically a sand filter. The water from the well passes through this filter, the sand filters it out, and then the water goes out into our distribution system. So there was a time, probably 20 years ago, where the Water Authority had none of these systems. And so we were pumping water into the distribution system that really was not filtered for iron at all. We used to get a lot of iron complaints from people. Their fixtures in their house were stained, their clothing, the clothing in their washing machines was stained. The addition of these filters is one of the biggest improvements we've made to the water system in the past 20 years by deploying these, and they cost about $2.5 to $3 million a piece to put in. But by deploying the 30 that we have out there, we have really made a huge difference in the number of complaints that we get for iron-related issues in our system. That, together with a very aggressive flushing program, has reduced the iron complaints quite a bit in our system. One of the other issues with respect to infrastructure has to do with water mains and the age of the water mains. So in the southwest area, we have a lot of older cast iron water mains, and those were put in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And those water mains at that time were state of the art. We no longer use cast iron, though, because it's kind of brittle. And if there's any kind of movement of the ground or vibrations or undermining of the pipe, or just the freeze-thaw action that goes on during the winter time, we get water main breaks. So we do have a high number of water main breaks in the area of Lindenhurst and Copiague. And we have a pretty aggressive program of replacing water mains, because the real solution to remedying these water main breaks is to replace them. And we replace them with more modern pipe. It's called ductile iron pipe. It's a lot more resistant to stresses and fractures, and it's more tolerant to vibration, so it doesn't break. There's another reason why we have a lot of water main breaks in this area too, and that has to do with the fact that back in the 60s, the sewers in the southwest portion of the county were retrofitted to those streets, and they were put in after the water mains were put in. And the water mains are typically higher than the sewers, so they had to excavate out under the water mains to put the sewers in. And when they did that, they undermined the pipes in a lot of places. So we find that a lot of the water main breaks that occur in the southwest section of the county occur in places where the sewer crosses them. So like I said, the remedy to water main breaks and to improving this infrastructure is the replacement of pipe. So I've asked our distribution gurus to take a look and give me a map that showed where recent water main replacements have been made in the Lindenhurst and Copeg area. And this gives you an idea of some of the work that's done. First of all, if you look at the map, so this is the whole map of your area, you can see every street has pipe on it. And the pipe varies in size. And in this map, the red pipe is 6-inch pipe, the green pipe is 10-inch pipe, the blue pipe is 12-inch pipe. So you can see it's got different sizes, and that's all a function of the street you're on, how many houses there are, and what the demand is. And at the time when the system was developed, a lot of this pipe was put in. There weren't a lot of homes in this area, and as you know, the area has grown a lot. So in a lot of places, the pipe has really been outgrown by development. So most of these times when we go in and we do a pipe replacement, we not only replace the pipe, but we upsize the pipe. But if you take a look at most of these replacements, if I start down here on Atlantic, this is a 1,200-foot replacement of 8-inch and 6-inch, and it's typically associated in this case with main breaks. And main breaks is one of the criteria for water main replacements. But you can see that one job was $360,000 to do just over 1,000 feet of pipe. On Mound Street over here, we're replacing some 6-inch pipe. It was almost 500 feet of that. Again, it was for main breaks, but then you see this tie-in and eliminate dead ends. Very often when we do these replacements, we look around and we find places where the water main dead ends and that it doesn't run continuously from one area to another. And what that does is that creates water quality problems for the people that live on those dead ends. The water doesn't move enough, and so people tend to find that they get more rust in their water. The water sits for a while, and we get complaints about that. So what we do is very often when we do these main replacements, we tie it into an adjacent water main, and that way the water circulates. And as you can imagine, with more circulating water, there's more fresh water. People are getting much more recently pumped water than just the water that flows into their dead end. So that's always a benefit here. You take a look a lot. Here's another one on Beacon Street that we did here. This is actually, this is scheduled for this fall. This is a small section, 600 feet, but it involves a 75-foot tie-in also to eliminate a dead end. That's about $250,000. I could go on and show you all of these. We have a very robust program of doing these. Just these right here, this is almost $2 million worth of work. We spend about $18 million a year just replacing water mains. So this is, you know, we do a lot in the Lindenhurst area. We have a lot more to do. But this just gives you an idea of the recent work that we've done. This is Maplewood, Dewey Place. This one's coming up in the fall also. Taft and Wilson. We did that last year. South Wellwood, there's one, a small one, but 720 feet of it. So that just gives you an idea. It's a constant effort that we're making to take these old pipes out of service and replace them. It's very involved. You can imagine you have to dig up every pipe. You've got to restore the asphalt when it's all done. The road needs to be restored to as new conditions when it's all finished. We have to take everybody's service. So if your service for your home, that service line was connected to the old pipe, when we put the new pipe in, we have to take your service line and reconnect it now to the new pipe. So it's quite involved and quite expensive, but that's something that we're committed to and that our board is committed to, and we continue to do those every year. So I think that's pretty much it. I'm going to pass it over to Tom Schneider. If you have any questions at the end, we're going to have a question and answer part. And I'm going to pass this over to Tom Schneider from our laboratory now. Tom?
Thank you, Joe. I do want to mention that if you do have a question, there is a button on the bottom where you can submit your question, and we'll get to that at the very end of the presentation. Just to give you a little background about the Suffolk County Water Authority Laboratory, we are the largest groundwater laboratory in the country. As we stated in the beginning, that's actually by source. We have 586 wells, right? So we have more source points than anybody else in the nation. We only have, say, 1.2 million customers. We only serve 1.2 million customers, but we have a lot of work due to how much infrastructure we have. Okay, our standards for water quality are tougher than the state or federal regulations. What that means is that we put in our own standards and we make it tougher on ourselves and make sure that the quality of the water meets and exceeds every standard. We do test for 400 different parameters, 400 different compounds. Only 149 of those are regulated. So we go above and beyond in our testing protocols to do more than what's required. And for last year, we analyzed 75,000 samples for a total of 181,000 tests. Okay, we test at a higher frequency than what's required. What that means is that if our local health department says you must go there every quarter, every half year, we up the frequency. As a general rule, we do it twice as frequent as we have to. Okay, and finally, we not only do we test the source water, that's the water that's in the ground before any treatment takes place, we test it in the middle of treatment to make sure that, for example, the iron removal systems are removing the iron. We also test that where we're adding chlorine, we're adding pH adjustments. In some cases, we have filters to remove organic compounds. So we're testing all those filtration systems. Okay. Not only do we test the wells, but we have 300 sample stations, 300 plus sample stations in your neighborhood. This is distribution wide. So these sample stations are going to be outside your home, businesses and schools. So here's another way where we can test the water quality that's right outside your home. The majority of the sample stations are used for microbiology testing. Okay. Now, I mentioned that we do so much testing. Where do you find all the information of the who, what, when, and where? You could find it on our website. It's the Consumer Confidence Report. We have a total of 5 years up there. We also have something called the Supplemental Report, which is all the source water data before there's any treatment. So there's 5 years of that as well. So if you go onto our website, you could actually look at the document itself, which is about 54 pages, which is chock full of information. Or there's a separate little browser where you could click on your own neighborhood and it brings you the information for exactly where you are. It's a little bit of it's a map. You just click at approximately where you live and it'll give you all the information that you need for your drinking water. Okay. One more thing that I want to discuss is that as the technology has improved, so has the levels of detection. And a lot of this is not really explained well to the public. So I wanted to just take a minute and go over what some of the units of measure mean. So when we're talking milligrams per liter, right? So that would be 1 part per million. So that's like comparing 1 second to a million seconds, which is 12 days. Now, some of the new methodologies and instrumentation started to test at a part per billion, which is a microgram per liter. So that's like comparing 1 second to 32 years. And finally, now our newest technology that we use to do perfluorinated alkyl compounds and steroids and human growth hormones, that's actually down to 1 part per trillion. So that's like comparing 1 second to 32,000 years. So as the technology has gotten better, our level of detection has gotten lower, and we're able to detect more compounds in the water. All right. And with that, I'm going to bring it over to Ty Fuller. I just want to stop sharing my screen. All right. There you go, Ty.
All right, thank you very much, Tom. And again, my name is Ty Fuller. I am the lead hydrogeologist and Director of Strategic Initiatives at the Water Authority. Just a quick background myself. For a great part of my career, I oversaw the construction, design, and remediation of our network of 586 wells. More recently, I now oversee our Geographic Information Systems Department, which creates applications to monitor main breaks, to keep track of our water mains, to do asset management and inventory. Now, before I go into the discussion, I just want to let everybody know that on the bottom of your chat window is a Q&A option. You can click on that to put in any questions that we'll answer at the conclusion of this talk. After I wrap up, we'll address any and all questions. So just look at the bottom of your window. Make sure you put it in the Q&A section, not in the chat section, and we'll address all of your concerns. So we've given a nice overview of our entire system. As Joe Pokorny explained earlier, he talked about our distribution area, how our wells are set up, how we supply water to you, how we've made critical infrastructure improvements in the area. Tom explained, our water testing, which is some of the best in the nation. Now, what I want to talk about is our aquifer. When you hear about the aquifer throughout the island, we speak about it as a singular thing, our sole source aquifer. As a water company, we are one water supplier on an island that has close to 50 water suppliers. So, it's important for us to all work together because the water that we use can have an impact on a neighboring water district and vice versa. So in 2013, various water suppliers, along with the regulators and consultants and experts, all came together to form an organization known as the Long Island Commission for Aquifer Protection. And the charter for this organization, their mission was to protect and preserve, the groundwater supply. And one of the things that we wanted to set out to do was create a system where all water suppliers could share their water quality information in one universal setting. We wanted to create something that was easily accessible to the public so that they could view this information, they could learn more about the aquifer settings. So the program that we developed, which is available online, is known as WaterTraq. And as I stated here, it's an online GIS-based database. It takes all the information from all the different water suppliers. You can actually visit this site now. It's at the website liaquifercommission.com. And it gets information from all the various laboratories. So we have all the water quality information that's listed on there. And what I want to do really quickly is show you the website. So if you just bear with me, I'll just bring it up. And again, the website is liaquifercommission.com. So this is the website itself when you go there to look at WaterTraq. Now, what I want to point out first and foremost is the information that I'm going to show you is raw, untreated groundwater. There is a key difference between the water that's in the aquifer and the water that we test, treat, and deliver to the public. We even have an informational section here that explains that further. So you can learn more about the differences between groundwater and drinking water. What are drinking water standards? What is a maximum contaminant level? The New York State Department of Drinking Water Standards. We even have the State of the Aquifer report. The Long Island Commission for Aquifer Protection, they develop created an annual State of the Aquifer report. We have a groundwater resources management plan, and we even developed a conservation initiative known as Our Water, Our Lives that I'll go into in more detail. Now, what Joe pointed out is, fortunately living on the South Shore, the water quality is really good. The only thing that, we contend with here is naturally occurring iron. And that's due to the fact that the aquifer that we tap into, the Magathy, groundwater is older. The groundwater in this area ranges between 100 to 500 years. It predates most development that's occurred in the area. It's naturally acidic, so it will dissolve metals that are naturally occurring in the aquifer. So as a result, you have iron, and we've made significant investments to remove that. But again, iron is harmless. But what I want to show you is a visual of what that's about. So here, what I'm going to do is search for the raw, untreated groundwater samples. Again, this is not your drinking water samples. And what I'm doing here is just clicking where I can just search for anything above the standard. The compound that we've discussed in detail today is iron, just picking the most recent date. And then I click apply. And what it's going to do is just show all the wells that have impacts above the drinking water standard. And these are at locations where we normally would have treatment facilities in place. So you can see in this entire area, particularly in Lindenhurst, West Babylon, the South Shore, even throughout Nassau County, that's where you normally see areas of elevated iron levels. And that, again, has to do with geology, not anything else. So anyway, this is just a quick overview. I encourage you to visit the website so that you can learn more about the water that you drink and the state of the aquifer. So anyway, that is a quick overview on the WaterTraq program initiatives that we do. Now what I want to do is talk about what you can do, to protect and preserve our aquifer. We have a lot of different things that we do on our part. We have treatment systems in place. We do a lot of testing, but in order to, preserve the quantity of the water, because this is not an unlimited supply, there are initiatives you can do, and conservation is one of those things. So you should ask yourself, why should I conserve water? Long Island and New York in particular is a pretty unique place. Unlike other parts of the country, like California or the desert areas of Arizona, Midwest, we're not dealing with extreme drought conditions. On average, we get about 46 inches of rain per year, which is a significant sum, but you do have impacts that are within this region. We're surrounded by seawater. There's always concerns about seawater contaminating our aquifer system, which can result from overpumping. But, again, as I said, the groundwater supply is not limitless, and you can have those concerns with seawater impacts. And more importantly, the high water usage can have impacts on us having to create more infrastructure to deal with this problem. We have a network of 586 wells, and for the most part, 2/3 of those wells are only needed for summertime water usage. So that's a huge concern. And, those increased costs that come from these construction projects, ultimately are passed down to customers, in the form of higher rates. And then more importantly, the thing that we're concerned with is that the high peak water usage that typically occurs overnight due to irrigation, it can impact water pressure, which can have a negative impact on fire protection. That is a key goal for us, is to ensure that we have enough water pressure in our system so that if, heaven forbid, there is a fire, we can address that immediately. And again, as I stated earlier, overpumping can have negative water quality impacts. Living on an island, you can have these impacts that occur from seawater contamination or nearby water quality impacts. So what I'm showing here is a graph that shows water usage over 3-day period at various times of the year. So here, it's showing the time, and on the y-axis up here is showing the gallons used. So look at the different periods throughout the year. You have winter, you have summer, you have a rainy winter day. Now let's look at the wintertime water usage. Now what you're looking at here is a period between midnight and about 6 a.m. And for the most part, there's very little water usage. People are usually sleeping around 6, 7. That's when people wake up, they're getting dressed, kids are going to school, people are going to work. You have consistent water usage throughout the day. And, at night, the water usage drops off. Not a big deal. But if you compare that to the summertime, and you look at that same time period, 5 a.m. approximately, you have an exponential increase in water usage. Why is that? The reason being is irrigation systems. A lot of people, their irrigation systems run between, midnight to 6 a.m. or, 3 to 7, as we pointed out before. And that leads to that exponential increase in water usage. And you can see that it's quite significant. I mean, you're talking about, approximately a 25-fold increase in water usage. But even during a rainy summer day, and I'm sure you've seen this as you're driving down the street, it's raining heavily and people's sprinkler systems are still going off. You still have a significant amount of water usage. And this is the impact that results in us having to make significant infrastructure investments, that summertime water irrigation. And that's what we call the irrigation situation. And this is something that we definitely want to address. So, things that, we want to pass off to you in terms of the knowledge is, try to change your irrigation timer settings. If you have an irrigation timer, try to make sure it's not set to operate between 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. These are critical times because a lot of times people just set it and forget it. You can set it earlier, and one of the advantages to that is that you'll have more water pressure. Because if you have lower water pressure, everything is being used, across the board, then, you're not going to be able to address the problems that you have with your grass. So try to set the timer a little earlier to deal with that problem. And then another thing, very simple, set an odd even watering schedule. And, this is important because grass needs to be stressed. This encourages deeper root growth. It encourages grass to be stronger. You don't need to water every day. Grass is pretty resilient. And something that I'm a big fan of is smart irrigation timers. The irrigation timers, what they do is they'll connect to your Wi-Fi system and it'll connect to a local weather station so that if you have the potential for rain or rain has occurred, the system will know not to operate. And, the beauty of that is that you'll get savings without having to, even do anything, because the system is doing some level of thinking for you. And we also offer a $50 rebate off of a bill for purchasing the smart controller. And I'll discuss that in a little bit more detail later. So let's compare the various users. On average, our customers typically use approximately 130,000 gallons annually. Normally across the board. But, when you go to certain areas, particularly on the East End, sometimes you have like larger homes, mansions, people that, consume a lot more water than, the average user. And as a matter of fact, one of our largest users uses approximately 22 million gallons. Now, this setup that they had was a combination of irrigation systems and also the use of geothermal systems that uses public water. That's not something we advocate. Thankfully, our board recently banished the use of geothermal systems using public water because, again, this is a home. To compare that to a critical facility like a hospital, a hospital uses on average about 14.5 million gallons, and that's for critical usage compared to this large water user. So that's what we're trying to address with a lot of our initiatives. So in order to tackle this problem, in 2019, the SCWA board created a conservation rate. We are strongly encouraging conservation. I'm sure a lot of you have received phone calls over the summer or letters or emails. This is a strong push that we've been doing. And what we did, similar to other parts of the country, we're trying to keep the rates low as possible. For the people that don't use excessive water, but the people that do use the excessive amount of water, they're now charged a premium so that they can deal with the increased costs potentially from those infrastructure improvements. So this is a breakdown of how the conservation rate structure works. A person that uses in a given quarter 78,540 gallons will be charged a standard rate. And I want to be clear about this. That amount of water usage in a given quarter, that's something that most of our customers do not exceed. We're very much aware of that. So, again, practicing good, irrigation habits like we've described, you for the most part should not exceed that. But for those customers that do exceed that rate, they are now charged a premium rate at $2.34 per 1,000 gallons for every gallon over that threshold. So another reason, you should conserve to avoid that. And the big point is, like I showed in that last slide, we want to address these larger estates who use excessive water. they should bear the bulk of the cost. It's a responsibility on them, and we feel like they should, bear more of a responsibility to deal with these increased infrastructure needs that we have as a result. So a couple more tips on conservation. One of the things that we always point out, in addition with smart irrigation controllers, is using rain sensors. Rain sensors are a great tool. You can set that up in your house. It'll also collect rain. If it goes beyond a certain threshold, it'll trip off your irrigation controller. So the combination between that and smart irrigation controller, you cannot go wrong with that. Watering less often, I pointed that out, that grass likes to be stressed. So you want to, ensure that you water less. Grass on average needs about an inch a week, so if you can reduce the water usage, that'll help. The use of EPA WaterSense products, that's something that can help you both indoors and outdoors. I mean, this can be a combination of low flow shower heads, faucet aerators, the irrigation controllers, the smart irrigation controllers, all of those things. If you look at the label and it says EPA WaterSense, you should use that. And we do offer rebates for those products. Shortening your shower time always helps. Cutting it down by 5 or 10 minutes could save you several hundred gallons. And again, you're getting those savings in the form of a lower water bill. And detecting and fixing leaks. This is something where a small drop can add up and waste thousands of gallons. So you always want to check that. That's something that is something that will help significantly. Shutting off your tap when brushing your teeth, again, that's something that a lot of us are guilty of, but cutting that off, again, can save you several hundred gallons. Making sure that you fully load your washing machine, again, so that you don't have to waste water, through additional cycles. Keeping your plants moist, using mulch, that's something that can help prevent the additional water wasting from irrigation. And don't hose off your tool. Don't hose it off if another tool is going to work. A lot of times people like to spray off things, waste a lot of water that way. And something that people may not be aware of, going to a car wash instead of using your hose. Car washes typically recycle their water, so they're actually wasting less water than you would by using your hose at home. So I pointed out the rebates that we offer, and we also do another thing where we do one-on-one consultations. We'll go directly to your home and, help you conserve. And this all falls under the umbrella of the WaterWise programs. And the first one, the WaterWise Checkup. This is a great service. I encourage you all to partake in it. You can visit the website, scwa.com, to get more details. But with this program, a team of experts, they'll come into your home and they'll give you a one-on-one consultation and develop a personalized roadmap to help you save water. This is great. I mean, we've had significant savings from our customers from this, and I encourage you to partake in that. And then also with the WaterWise credit program, you can get a credit for up to $50 for the purchase of water-saving devices. All you got to do is get the device, go to your local hardware store, save that receipt, send it to us, and you'll get a rebate on your bill. Definitely want to partake. And here's the information that you can use to contact us. We have the number listed, 631-292-6101, or visiting our website, scwa.com, or you can email us at waterwisecheckup@scwa.com. I encourage everyone to partake in this. And what I pointed out earlier with the Long Island Commission for Aquifer Protection, we developed a wonderful program known as Our Water, Our Lives. We even have a website for it, ourwaterourlives.com. You can visit this website. You can take a pledge to reduce water usage. We encourage you to do that. You can get all the tips that I pointed out on conserving water. We have social media links in there, so you can sign up and, link onto our Instagram or Twitter, Facebook, and take the pledge. We want to conserve. This is something that you can do to help protect, preserve, and maintain our aquifer for generations to come. And with that, say thank you. And any questions, we'll definitely take it at this time.
So we've got one question. If you want to click on the Q&A, Lauren is concerned about some of the contaminants that we test for. Tom, I'm not sure if you want to take this one.
Yeah, let me start. So normally what happens is the EPA comes up. They do a study with toxicology. They come up with a regulation, And then New York State can come back and say, well, we like what you've done here, and we can make it a little bit more stringent. And then finally, our local Suffolk County can actually make the regulation more stringent. So what we do is we follow the rules that are set up by those three organizations. They do the toxicology, they figure out what the regulation should be. Now, a lot of the compounds you mentioned, some of them are emerging compounds. So for example, we'll take PFOS. So PFOS, we had a health guideline of 400 parts per trillion. And now since the EPA didn't do anything, New York State came up with their own proposed regulation of 10 parts per billion, 10 parts per trillion. So what that means is that when that goes into effect, we will not be able to serve water that is 10 parts per trillion or higher. So our first course of action is to remove it from service and install treatment. The law is very clear that you cannot exceed any of these guidelines. One of the challenges that we face with emerging contaminants like PFOS and 1,4-dioxane is that these are not naturally occurring. They are man-made chemicals that are used in hundreds, if not thousands, of consumer products. So a lot of the shampoos and detergents and lotions have 1,000 parts per billion, or 1,000 to 100,000 parts per billion. Now we're looking at removing them below 1 part per billion. So that's a very, very big task. Also, the same thing with PFOS. PFOS, you're going to find it in a lot of stain guards, water protectants, a lot of things that are coated in fabric, Stain Master, Scotch Guard. And it's actually found in a lot of food because it's in part of the packaging. Anything that's grease resistant, pizza boxes, popcorn bags, those products are in there. So one of the challenges we have is we have to make sure that it's not in the water and that we remove it. But we face such a big challenge because it is in these consumer products. It's things that you're using that, and then you're disposing of. And that's how it impacts the environment.
Hey, Tom.
Yes.
Hey, Tom. Lauren's question, though, has to do with this environmental working group study that indicated that Suffolk County water had chromium, nitrate, PFAS, radium, THMs, and radon in them. Would you speak to the levels that we typically have and that study in specific? Because as far as I know, that was based on raw water sampling data and not treated water sampling that our customers receive.
I think with the EWG, I'm not sure if they've done their toxicology studies. I think they just make recommendations. I know that for a lot of the compounds you mentioned, we have been testing for.
Well, Tom, do we exceed any of the standards for any of those compounds? Does anybody in Suffolk County receive water that exceed those standards?
You know what? I would have to check to see what the EWG is specifically mentioning.
No, the drinking water standards.
No, we don't. We're not exceeding drinking water standards.
Well, I think that's the question.
Allowed to. If there's a drinking water standard that's exceeded, the well comes out of service, and then we have to install treatments. Without knowing exactly what the EWG is mentioning as for.
Tom, the question has to do with federal guidelines. Do we exceed any federal guidelines for any of those compounds?
I would say that short answer is no. But if there was an exceedance, say for THMs, that would be listed in our annual water quality report. So if we find an exceedance, right, that's listed in a separate section, right, we could use PFOS as an example. Hey, we found some PFOS at this site, this date. We took it out of service, and then we're only allowed to put it back into service once treatment is installed and the water is found to be lower than the guideline.
Well, I would urge Lauren to take a look at the water quality report. Again, I don't have it in front of me, but I'm looking again at chromium and nitrate, radium and radon. I don't believe we have any exceedances in those areas, at least in this past year's report, Tom.
That is correct. The other thing that I'd like to mention is, besides the EPA, the World Health Organization and the European Union, they actually do a very good job in doing toxicology and coming up with regulations. So I actually look towards them because they're a little bit more proactive than our own EPA as to where the standards are going. Typically, a toxicology study needs to be done, and then they lower the standard.
And just so Lauren understands, and there's been a lot of discussion about emerging contaminants. PFAS is one of the ones that Lauren points out there. We have been aggressively treating for PFAS even before the standard has changed. The New York State is about to change the standard now, probably within a month or so. But we've been treating for it for several years. We have GAC systems all throughout the island treating PFAS now. And in the Lambert Avenue area, I'm not sure, but I don't think there's any PFAS in any of our wells or any of our well treatment systems for PFAS in place in that area.
That is correct. There is a little bit of PFOA in one of the wells at Great Neck, but there's a treatment system that's been in place
Right.
For 14 or 15 years.
So really, there are no PFAS detections in our system in this area in Lambert Avenue and Copeg or Lindenhurst.
Why don't you go ahead and jump right into the next one?
Okay, the question was from Lisa Daniels, and what she said was, you mentioned that acidity can lead to iron in the water. Is this acidity treated, since acidic water can damage pipes and allow leaching of lead from pipes? The answer is yes. We add lime to our water during the treatment process to make it less corrosive. This is part of our corrosive protection measures. And just to be clear, the only things we ever add to our water typically is lime to adjust the pH, and chlorine to ensure that the water that leaves our system will stay disinfected and free of any issues that could be encountered along the pipes. So that's what we do to ensure that metals or lead or any impacts are not affected by you.
And Ty, if I might, so Lisa understands, the Water Authority has done reviews about leads in our system. There's really very lead in the water system itself. If there is lead in anybody's drinking water, it's typically because of the household plumbing products that were used to construct the home. There are no lead water mains out there, and as far as we know, all of the lead service lines, if there were any, there really weren't many used on Long Island at all when Long Island was built out. But any of them that were out there have been replaced. So there's very, very little lead in the system. The biggest concern we have is homes that were plumbed using leaded solder. And the years for that, Tom, you might know better, but it was prior to like 83, or because lead solder was outlawed. You no longer can buy lead solder to plumb a house with, but there was a period there when it was used. But the good news is that we do adjust the pH of the water so that it's neutral and it's non-corrosive, and it doesn't corrode your pipes or the pipes out in the distribution system. I'm sorry, Tom.
No, you're exactly right. I believe it was about 1982 where it was outlawed. So our groundwater does not contain lead. So the concern is what is in your fixtures and your own household plumbing. Right. So by adjusting the pH, like you said, above 7 helps tremendously.
Okay, I just want to say this once again, because there may be some attendees that might be saying something in the microphone, but just to be clear, as an attendee, we can't hear you. So if you do have a question, you have to put it in the Q&A section on the bottom. You can just click, there's a Q&A icon to ask any questions, or there may be another icon where it says raise hand, in case you have any questions and you felt like we weren't able to address you. Aside from that, we're not going to be able to hear you.
We have another question, Ty.
Question.
Oh, sure. So I'm going to try to look up. So the question is, it says, I was concerned about this report, and then it links to a Hatch article from Huntington. I'm going to try to look up the article now, as it's not hyperlinked in the question. but I believe it relates to cancer studies and contaminants linked to the tap water in the county.
I mean, the big takeaway, and again, we're water providers. We're not health experts. The health department, the New York State Health Department, the EPA set the drinking water standards for drinking water on Long Island and throughout the state, throughout the country. Our job is to meet or exceed those standards. When I say exceed, I mean provide you drinking water that is well below whatever the drinking water standard is. And we do that routinely. We do not exceed drinking water standards routinely. It's very, very infrequent that ever happens. So you have to be very careful with a lot of this information that you find out on the web. As you know, the web is loaded with all kinds of information. You referred to the environmental working group at one point. The drinking water industry took exception to a lot of that report at one time because the data that they used, and remember, they just go and they just mine data off the internet and they run their analysis on that. A lot of the data that the environmental working group used was based on raw water that came out of the ground, untreated water. So it meant that this was the water at the head of a pump. Well, the water that comes out of a well, out of a pump, is not the water that people receive. We treat it before it goes out into the system. Very often it's filtered if there are any kind of contaminants in it. And so the drinking water that you are provided with, you can more easily see that if you take a look at our drinking water report. And we put that report out annually, and it goes, you can go to our website and you can type in your address and you can see the drinking water standards for your water and the levels of the contaminant, if there is a contaminant, in your drinking water. Most of the times when you look at our drinking water report, you'll see the letters ND, meaning non-detect. It's very, very typical for that to show up in our drinking water report.
I'd also like to add that we have a very good local health department that takes surveillance samples. So on their own, with their own laboratory, they make sure that we are doing our job. So not only do we put our testing results out there, they go out there to make sure that what we are doing is accurate and within the law.
And we do have one more question, or two more questions. The first one being, are there any known carcinogens in Lindenhurst water that are not able to be filtered out of the water? The short answer to that is no, but I can let Tom or Joe kind of expound on that.
Yeah, Tom, the water quality report speaks for itself, right?
They do. The hardest thing to remove from water is actually the 1,4-dioxane. There has to be a separate treatment system installed for that. So typically, if we have an iron problem, we can remove that with an iron removal system. We use something called granulated activated carbon, which removes all kinds of pharmaceuticals, pesticides, herbicides, degreasers, PFOA, PFOS. The one thing that it does not do a good job on is the 1,4-dioxane. And if looking at the map that you had on before, I believe there was a positive detect at Great Neck Road. I think that well field does have some 1,4-dioxane in there that we're looking towards removing.
If it's okay, I'd like to just show something really quick so people know where on the website they should go. I just want to share my screen really quickly. So if you go on our website and you just go to water quality, and then you go to water quality reports, you click on 2020 annual report, click to view water quality in your community. And it'll actually open up an application that you can search. So you can enter in your address. So for argument's sake, I have an address here in Lindenhurst. I'm just typing that in. Zoom me right to this area, and if that was your house, you could click on it, and there you go. You pull up your water quality report, and you have all the details there. And this is everything. It tells you the organic that we tested for. When we were saying ND, non-detect, we didn't have anything. Or this right here, was there any water violations? No. The low values, whenever you see ND over here, that's non-detect. So, Tom, I don't know if you want to speak on that or anything, but this area is just excellent water quality in my opinion.
I think
So,
the issue that I see there is that we have iron in the water, and that's what we were talking about before.
Yeah, and that's it. That's the only thing we pointed out was iron.
Go down to the cancer-causing items like the synthetic organics and the volatile organics.
All of this right here. No. Yeah.
Maybe Ty, you want to explain why, particularly in this area, the South Shore, these folks are actually somewhat insulated from.
Absolutely. It really has to do with geology in this area. I'll try to see if I can just show it really quick. But essentially, in this area, you have these naturally occurring clays that protect you in this whole area. And I'm a resident of South Shore. This is something that I'm definitely appreciative of. It's known as the gardener's clay, and I'm showing it here. It's like this line. And what it does is, it's this marine clay that protects you from the surface contaminants. And it's also one of the reasons why the water is so acidic, because, that water that we're tapping into, it's low oxygen, it's older water, it has a great deal of protection. If you notice, this is right along the South Shore. But the only downside, if you want to call it that, is that you end up with naturally occurring iron. That's the main issue here. The issue on the South Shore is not about organic contaminants or volatile or anything else. Our wells are so deep and the water is so old that the water, in my opinion, is some of the highest quality. However, with iron, which people do take supplements for, people that are iron deficient. So it's not like it's a terrible thing, but filters and the majority investment goes into that. And you can see right in this Linden.
All right. So hopefully that answers that question.
Did you mention something? Any figures comparing contaminant concentrations, Joe? Was that something that you were pointing out?
I think that's one of our listeners.
Oh.
That question.
Okay.
Are there figures readily available comparing contaminant concentrations of raw water versus treated water for different towns? So we do have raw water data, right, Tom? Isn't that in the supplemental report?
That's in the supplement file, and it's actually by well field. So that's the
By well field.
237 well fields.
Okay. So they would need to know what well field is near their home in order to do that comparison?
They would. I don't think there really is a direct comparison. The one thing that I'd like to mention is that depending where you are in Suffolk County, you're going to have a different water quality issue. For example, we know in Lindenhurst there is the naturally occurring iron, but if you go out east, you might have farms where you have pesticides and herbicides that would have to be removed. So right now I'm in Hop Hog. Hop Hog is a large industrial park, and we're concerned with what is going on in the industrial park. So we're looking at more degreasers, solvents, and 1,4-dioxane in a place like this. So depending where you are, the geology has a big impact, but also the human impact is also quite significant.
But the big point is, regardless of where you are, we are constantly sampling the water, constantly looking at the well water. People like Tom in our laboratory know these wells backwards and forwards. They watch the water quality trends. And if there's anything that is of concern, our laboratory works with our engineers to address it.
And if I may, I just want to answer the next question for Lisa. And I just want to point something else out. She said, are there any health concerns for iron in the water? And Tom, you want to give a short answer with that one?
I think the biggest issue with the iron is that it makes the water, discolored.
That's it. It's an aesthetic thing. And Lisa, I just want to point out to you in this informational section, we have a link right to the New York State Department of Health drinking water standards, which gives descriptions on everything. And I'm just going right to where iron is. And it points out with iron has no health effects. So, it's really more about an aesthetic thing, as Tom pointed out. And that's why we make that investment in the filters.
We've got another question here. It says, does the Superfund cleanup site affect water quality south of Montauk Highway? The site's on Montauk Highway between Wellwood and Shire Road. It was an old industrial uniform site. I don't know if anyone is familiar with that specific Superfund site or not, that can speak to that cleanup or affecting water quality there. But I don't believe we see anything specific there that we don't see in other parts of Lindenhurst, correct?
No, no. And yeah, I mean, there are a number, as anybody that's lived on Long Island knows, there are a number of different locations where there have been spills or contamination events. You know, the Water Authority is obviously the recipient of all of this because we're pumping the water out of the ground. And that's why having a very active laboratory with very aggressive sampling is important, because the only way to protect us and our residents against that type of contamination is by detecting it in a sampling and then taking proactive measures. So, you know, I don't know specifically about this particular site between Wellwood and Shire. You know, we have a well field at Lambert Avenue, Copeg, which is a little bit to the west of that location. All we have is iron in the water at that location. So we do have an iron filter. Again, if you looked at our water quality report, you could look for the contaminant that is being discharged at the Superfund site, and you could take a look at the list and see if it shows up. I can pretty much assure you it doesn't. But again, you know, our protection against all of this, because we don't know everything that's going on at every location in Suffolk County, our biggest protection is our testing, frequent testing and monitoring of our wells.
I think they said between Wellwood and Shore Road.
Uh-huh.
Yep. So like Joe said, the short answer is no. We don't.
Well,
we
that is,
don't
yeah, that's the well field that's closest to that area.
It wouldn't be impacted. Those wells are, you know, 600-700 feet deep.
Right.
The contamination that you're seeing is more on the surface. So, you know, as I pointed out, that protective gardener's clay, that contaminant's not going to work its way down into our wells.
Right. Yeah.
Water flows to the south. It moves actually on average about a foot per day. So it's just flowing right past our well field. If anything, I'd be concerned with is when it discharges out into the bay,
Yeah.
ocean. That's, you know, that's really more, you know.
Yeah. With a lot of these, you know, contamination events or locations on the South Shore, by the time they're deep enough to be of an impact to our well, they're already offshore. Because remember, as I showed you in that model, the water has to travel vertically and horizontally. And by the time it gets down 100 feet, it's already traveled 1,000 feet horizontally in general. You know, it's all particular to the hydrogeology, but that's typically what happens on the South Shore.
Thank you, everyone, for participating. Thank you, panelists. And we'll see you. We'll see you next time. Maybe in person. Maybe it'll be another virtual water talk. Remains to be seen. But we'll be seeing you.